Legion of Superheroes issue 7, Brian Michael Bendis writing with Stephen Byrne and Ryan Sook on the art. First thing I'm going to say about this is that, like, it said in the credits that Sook did the first page and then Byrne did the rest, and I'm like, honestly, I couldn't tell that. Like, it still looks. Byrne did a great job matching Sook's style with this.
Really?
He did, and it doesn't look like Byrne that I'm used to from like Wonder Twins or some of his other stuff.
So,
that
honestly,
he's done on.
If Byrne has a very distinctive style that I can picture very.
If they tell me
right.
that this credits page is like a mistake and they copied in the wrong thing and he's not actually on the book, I would believe them, because I honestly thought this looked Sook the entire time.
I know he is on the book because I know he was tweeting about it this week.
Yeah.
Because he has a very cartoony style, very clean lines, very cartoony and expressive, and it's great.
It's toned down, but you can tell that it's still Byrne. Like, you look at it, and you're like, no, because if he was doing this series on Twitter of Marvel versus DC stuff, so there was some like really cool, like Batman versus Cap and Superman versus Hulk. The one that really stood out was Wonder Woman and Thor. Like, it looked fantastic.
I'm actually going to Comixology now just to get preview pages.
Yeah. But you can still tell it's Byrne throughout, except for that first page, which, if you tell me it's Sook, fine. It's Wildfire's face, which is just a helmet. So there's no really distinguishing features that you could tell me.
I mean, I suppose that's one fair point, is that there's not like a regular page of Sook art to compare it to, but it looks very in the style of Sook. Like, obviously, the colouring helps match it as well.
Right.
Yeah, I'm looking now. That I can tell it is Byrne, but it definitely doesn't look like his usual style.
No, it looks different from normal Byrne.
Credit to him there for matching the tone of the book, I guess. I'm assuming this is what it's meant to look like most of the time.
This is what it looks like. Yeah, this feels very in line with it. So yeah, I mean, I think one critique I'll give this book is that as I was reading the start of it, I was kind of like, okay, what happened last time? Where are we? What's going on?
Look, I love Legion, and I was fighting hard for a Legion book. I'm running out of steam on this one, just because it feels like it's moving at a pace.
I'm sorry, the idea of long live the Legion for how many years, and then he gets like 10 issues into a Legion.
Like, I almost wish Bendis would hand this off to someone else, like a like a Mark Russell, right? Because I feel like Mark Russell could tell this story, and it just, everything comes off as dry here, and I don't know.
It's lacking.
Like, here, go ahead, Pete.
It's lacking a little momentum, and I do feel like the characters I mean, this is obviously a common Legion problem, but I do feel like maybe like having a few less characters might help things overall. Because there's a lot of individual moments and scenes in here that I still really like, and
it's still a very good issue, but we're still dealing with the Rimbor stuff, and it feels like I don't know. I feel like with the Legion book, stuff should be moving a little bit quicker, and I think weaving stuff in and out.
Yeah, my bigger problem, I think, is that it's been kind of like flipping between its focus issue to issue a little bit. So it kind of feels like if it had just focused on, like, you know, the Trident stuff, but then we had the Force showing up and they all having to like fight the Brand's police force essentially, and we had there's been a lot of bouncing around in terms of what the focus is, and I feel like if it had just stuck to like a couple of, like, say 2 or 3 characters for an arc, and then kind of like shifted to other characters rather than the way it's dancing around a core bunch of them right now. Anyway, so basically they go to this meeting that Brand's got, a big Senate meeting kind of thing.
Well, they bust down the doors to United Planets meeting.
And basically, Cosmic Boy is, as they put it later, kind of whining about their influence and what they've been up to, and how they're handling the what's the planet called?
Which one, about Rimbor?
Yeah, Rimbor. Yeah. How dealing with them, how they've kind of ostracized them, despite the fact that they're here to say, hey, maybe we shouldn't do that yet. Maybe we can sort of still tackle this peacefully. But they end up being very impressed with Superboy, because Superboy kind of speaks up and tries to, like, kind of, de-escalate the situation, and Brand's like, let's have lunch. So yeah, there's a lot of like and the cliffhanger definitely ties back into all this, but there's definitely some different scenes here.
I haven't gotten the vibe that they were having a leadership crisis in the Legion, right? Like when
No.
this started, I didn't realize that Cosmic Boy was the de facto leader outside of the flashback to when they first came together with Lightning Lad and Saturn Girl. That where Brand was all for them before she turned on them. And I was like, wait, so he's actually the leader, so he's mad now that they're trying to take that away because the United Planet's holding them responsible, and he kind of, his point of view is everyone defers to Brainy anyways, so like why does he even need to be a leader? So I'm thinking, oh well, this is kind of, they're gonna end up with Brainiac 5 as the leader, and then they go to hold a vote. Someone nominates John, who, despite the fact he still hasn't finished his training.
Well, as he puts it, he doesn't even know where the
Right.
bathroom is yet. Maybe he shouldn't be in charge.
Right. And so I did like that. But then Ultra Boy gets nominated to deal with this and ends up winning the vote to become leader. And it would have just been nice if we would have had, signs of this early on. And I might just be forgetting it, but a lot of this book seemingly comes out of left field.
Yeah,
like
well,
same with the stuff with Brand, where I feel like her characterization shifts from book to book.
yeah,
from issue to issue.
the bulk of this issue is about the leadership crisis, but there's other scenes sort of sprinkled throughout, like Lightning Lad buying an apartment for his family in the city.
That looks just like their one that they came from on Winath. And then his mom's like, this is the same. And then you come find out it's just a program, right?
Yeah, they can basically, holodeck it to whatever they want. And he's like, oh, I thought you'd like it to look the same. He's like, no, but that was just the best we could afford. Can you make it better? And it turns into this lavish apartment. And she's like, yeah, this is way better. And it was a seamless trip at go. But yeah, most of it is dealing with this vote and the leadership crisis and lots of speech bubbles. And I like Bendis comic books, but I think Legion's almost like bringing out the worst in him in this sense, and Young Justice too, actually, because there's so many characters. So he's obsessed with having like lots of characters commenting constantly about what's going on in a scene.
Mm-hmm. I will say, before we started recording, we were gearing up. He was like, I've got 2 books left, so one of them's Legion, so it might take a little while. And then he screenshotted a page and showed it, and it was like maybe even longer than I thought. And I was like, oh boy, that's a lot of bubbles.
Yeah, a lot of bubbles. But yeah, so it is what it is. The cliffhangers, basically, the Rimbar forces show up, including what's his face's father, and they're like, we're here to what? All members of the United Planets, this Legion of Superheroes, are under arrest according to the laws of our planetary. Surrender or failure to do so will bring about nothing but your finality. So, yeah, I'm having a hard time getting super invested in what the overall plot is.
Yep. And so the next issue is the trial of the Legion, and it's where the next 2 are going to have all those artists doing one page, and I just
1 page per character thing, right?
Yeah, and I don't feel like that's going to help the issues I'm having with this book right now. I'm still going to pick them up because I want those issues, but I'm almost ready to say, hey, I might just want to read this in trade, because the whiplash of month to month right now, it's like, to me, Bendis is kind of all over the place. There's not that conciseness there is with Superman or even Action.
Reading it in trade might help, admittedly. I think maybe the problem here, at least from a monthly perspective, is that I feel like it's still kind of, I don't know, it's kind of expected us to just sort of have an understanding of what a lot of this is from the get-go. Right. And even Matt, who's a Legion fan, isn't necessarily been able to take it all in and just that easily. So
sounds very dense.
Yeah.
It is dense, but again,
it feels dense.
Like, my big problem is, I understand what Bendis is trying to do with the president about, she has complex feelings about the Legion, but it feels like we're dealing with 2 different characters from issue to issue, whereas she wants to have them, basically revoke their status as a protector force. Yet here, when they bust through the door, all because John smooths it over, she's fine with it. Like, that doesn't seem to fit with everything else that we've got to this point, But yeah, and just that page at the beginning, outside of a stylistic choice, I expected Wildfire to have a bigger role, considering he's kicking off
or
the issue, right?
or any role.
And he's relegated to the background. Like you see him in the background a couple times, but I don't think he has another, maybe one or two speech bubbles. But out of that,
I
so I
think
don't know. It's just kind of a mixed bag.
part
at
of
this
the
point.
that's part of the problem is that you give this first page introducing this
Mhm.
character, and then it turns out that we didn't really need to do that this issue, that it's not that relevant, and therefore all you're doing is giving me something else to kind of like try and remember that ultimately is just filling my brain with stuff that isn't even relevant for now.
Just a question. If you recall back when Bendis was announced to be coming to DC, one of my biggest complaints with Bendis in general is team books, is that I feel like a lot of his characters all sound the same.
Mhm.
Now, this is slightly different to Young Justice as well, in that, okay, Young Justice, you already know most of those characters. And this is especially Pete, who is a relative newcomer to, what, 90% of the characters in this book, if not more.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Do they feel distinct to you when they're all talking in this issue, when there's, bubbles from everyone? Are you able to tell this is this character, or does it all just kind of sound interchangeable?
I don't know. Just kind of.
I mean, I feel even not having the prior, because these are different versions,
Mm.
right? So I got the vibe here that Cosmic Boy is still a hothead, right? That was more traditionally Lightning Lad. So if they're going to switch that, that's fine, because that's been consistent thus far.
Sure.
Is that Bendis's Cosmic Boy is the hothead that rushes in without thinking, and that's why they're challenging his leadership. So that's still all there. So when he does have the argument with Saturn Girl, that all feels unique between the characters. But then when you start throwing all these other characters in, it does feel like it's kind of up to the artist who they want to draw in there, because it's not driving the story forward. It's almost like background noise.
Yeah.
So you can put in whoever you
saying a lot
want.
of those other the main
Right.
3 or 4 characters maybe are distinct, but then all the other side stuff
It could
feels
do with
interchangeable.
toning some of that stuff down. I did chuckle. Triplicate Girls got a joke at one point when they were voting, where one of them says, what if we just all vote for ourselves? And the other Triplicate Girl goes, shh, then we'll win.
Right.
Which I thought was
so Triplicate Girls vary because of the way that the bubbles go and the way that she's represented. Each of her words are almost a different color, right? Not words, but each of the bubbles, depending who's talking. Yeah, so that fits. So she sticks out. But Colossal Boy shows up at one point. They don't even address him as Colossal Boy, because at least my issue didn't have it. Had the symbols, but not the names. But I happen to know his name's Jim, spelled Gim. From me. But outside of that, I wouldn't have no idea, why he's, pushing in on this, because there's no character development with him up to this point. He's almost just like, that could have been anybody. Same with Mon-El. They haven't even addressed his name's Mon-El, and he has some type of relationship to the House of El. So I thought that was
like John would want to know.
Here. Right. So they call him Mon. And so you're thinking they're sitting next to each other, and he's arguing with Colossal Boy over this stuff, but it never gets brought up. So again, that could have been anybody at this point. So again, it feels like a mixed bag where it's not a bad issue. Like, I wouldn't say this was, a mess, or I had a hard time following. It's just stylistically, I just feel like there's a lot going on, and that doesn't help anybody.
It's a bit too much noise. It's one of these things where, because we're in this futuristic setting with this futuristic version of the world where, and we have all these characters, it's you can get away with this a little bit better in like a present day setting, or maybe like a period setting that we're more familiar with, because there's a lot of rules that we just understand, or there's a lot of job roles that we understand. When you're reading something that's set in present day, it's very easy to remember characters who we might not even remember the names of, because let's say there's a firefighter, and there's like another person who's a police officer, and then there's someone else that is this, or someone else who is that, and it's very easy in your brain to have just like an understanding of who everyone is and how they fit into the roles that they're part of in the world. When you're reading a book like this, you're presented with 50 characters who are all in colourful costumes. I don't necessarily know what roles they all play.
What's interesting here is, again, without reading this book, what I kind of want to compare what you're talking about there is Far Sector, in that there's a lot of rules that we need to learn about this, place
Mhm.
and the races, and you kind of pick it up as you go. But there's only really one main character to focus on early on, especially,
but
which
but
makes it a
we're
lot easier
in
to follow, right?
right because we're in Joe's shoes in that book. We should be in John's shoes here, but John's only a background character through most of it, right? So we're getting stuff through the Legion's eyes in from different perspectives,
It needs that central
and
focus. I think that's
yeah,
a good
which
suggestion.
which
It
I
doesn't.
kind of thought that's what John being there was like.
It,
We're gonna be the outsider along with him,
I
experience
don't
all
even
of
think it needs
stuff
to be John per se. Like, I mean, if they wanted to make it Saturn Girl, but it has to, but whoever they pick, whoever Bendis would pick,
right.
it has to be them that he sticks with and says, no, this is our eyes and ears. At least for the first arc, this is who we're going to focus everything through. To give
Right.
everything else context around, and that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
uh,
Even if they had done that with like Lightning Lad, it would have made any of these characters. You're right.
it could have been any of the main ones, anyone
Right.
that you want to say, this is okay, this is who we're going to focus everything through for this first
Right.
arc. But instead, it's jumping around like like a present day Justice League book or something where we're just expected to know all these characters and everything that's going on. So that's it. If this was a Justice League book, I still have some problems with the way it's jumping around its plot. It would still feel a little bit clunky in that sense. So I don't know. It's kind of like, it's definitely a book that I'm not as pumped to read every month. Like, there's books like when I looked at the books I had for this week, I was like, oh my god, Suicide Squad and the first Tamaki Wonder Woman. Like, okay, those two are first, definitely. And I'm like, oh man, yeah, Plunge and Batman Superman are always good. Legion was at the bottom of the list. It was like, okay, yeah, Legion 2.
Yeah, see, I save Plunge for last because I know I'm gonna enjoy it. Right, that's one of my. But this was the last superhero book that I read this week, just because I knew. Not that I was dreading it, but I was like, it's gonna take forever. I tried to read it at work, and I got to that. I saw that first page, and I put it back in its sleeve and put it back in my backpack because I was like, I'm not gonna be able to read this with a bunch of people around. Like, I need to focus.
You're not gonna take any of that in.
Yeah, so I slowly put it back, and I saved it till this morning. So yeah, it's a shame because I do love Legion, but again, it's so complex because I wouldn't say it's a bad book.
No, it's
just it can do things better.
It's in that awkward territory where I'm happy to keep reading it, but I'm reading it under the hope that it gets better, rather than I'm excited because it's really good.
I might just have to get through the first 12 issues, so I have those, and it might be on the chopping block of physical.
Yeah, well, more books I expect to be ending in November and December, so we'll see what the relaunch slate's like, maybe, and then reassess.
Yeah, I think when we were talking about this last week in terms of new books being announced, we do have that DC fandom thing in sometime in August.
Yeah.
And they did say there would be comic book news in that, so we might get.
I mean, maybe that's where they announced the slate. I mean,
and I think that'll be around Solicit's time, so maybe we'll get something.
Unless it's just a little bit too early if they're saving everything for post metal, but maybe they'll actually launch a lot of books alongside the end of metal, and it won't actually be that early to do it next month.
Yeah,
or this month.
I mean, it's possible though that. I mean, when you have big announcements like that, you can announce them a couple of months before Solicit's and get away with it.
Yeah. I just know from I want to say it was Ryan Higgins that the Comic-Con at home didn't go over as well as they were hoping it would.
Yeah, I didn't hear a lot of interesting stuff coming from that, to be honest.
But then again, I'm like, well, that's because there was no big announcements. Like, I'm sure if you wanted to tune into those panels, I'm sure you got a lot of what you would want. But I don't think that's Comic-Con's fault. That's all the companies kind of pulling out.
Reasonable amount of TV news in it, I think, from various places, but not much for comics.
Yeah. Anyway, Legion of Superheroes issue 7, I think we're on. Matt, what are you giving it?
What did I have my favorite for? I'll give it an. I really like the art. I'll give it an 8. Like, I know I bagged on it a lot, but it's still a decent issue.
I love the cut-up version of this on YouTube. It's just the Legion of Superheroes review. It's going to have this long tangent about the stupid movies, and then the ratings, like, here 5 minutes after all this crap.
Also, all of those complaints, and Matt gave this a higher score than Batman Superman. And that was just not an 8 because of some foreheads.
A lot of foreheads. There are 8 heads, Connor.
Bizarre.
I told you I don't like rating things, so.
Wait, hold on. If that is an 8 head, then what's an 8 skin?
Don't go there.
You don't want to know. You don't want to know.
Since we could just double the number and apply it to things, I'm just.
You don't want to know.
Before anyone corrects me, I'm aware that the 4 in forehead and foreskin is not the number 4. I'm well aware of this. I'm playing with the language a little bit for the humor. Let's move on with our lives. Yeah, I'm not giving this an 8.
A joke is always better when you have to explain it. Always.
Yeah, but there's pedantic people on YouTube that'll get all, you know, la 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 la. Well, actually, there'll be Joe comic book guy from The Simpsons. There'll ironically be comic book guy in the comments of a comic book podcast, but only not about comic books. Anyway, I will give it 6.5.